Macquarie Park was set aside by the state government of New South Wales, as were all of the cemeteries around Sydney and New South Wales. But of course this cemetery wasn't always here. The cemetery is on the traditional lands of the Wallamatta clan of the Darug Nation, and it's important that we recognise that these are their traditional lands and country. The cemetery was dedicated by the state government in 1902, but it takes a while to get a cemetery up and running. And so they had to get trustees established, they had to prepare the ground, lay it all out. So it wasn't until 1922 that the first burial actually took place. And that was Henry Mashman, who was a potter who had a major pottery business over in what is now Chatswood. One of the really interesting things I think about the Northern Suburbs Cemetery, now Macquarie Park Cemetery, is its landscape design. It's part of what's called, I guess, an interwar design in landscaping and garden design. It has a central avenue that runs, it's called the main avenue, that runs into the cemetery and wraps around. And this was very important. It had trees that lined it, that really defined the avenue, and all of the religious denominations came out from this main avenue. Once the cemeteries opened in the 1920s, it really does start to service the population of the North Shore, and you can see the landscape really developing. What we would call now the older areas of Macquarie Park Cemetery are monumental in style, so they have large headstones, they have curbing, they've got interesting tiling and so on. Northern Suburbs was always wanting to be, I guess, a modern cemetery, and one of the reflections of that is their early innovative adoption of the lawn cemetery. It was one of two cemeteries in the 1950s that introduced lawn burials for Sydney-siders. This changes the style of the cemetery in a way, moving from a more formalised monumental space into more open parkland spaces. Moving on from lawn burial, the cemetery managers didn't just stop with that innovation. Right through into the 1980s, we get the introduction of freestanding above-ground crypts. The other introduction in the 1980s was niche walls for cremated remains, and that too really reflects the movement away from burial practices and the heightening of cremation. The introduction of large mausolea in Macquarie Park Cemetery has been, again, another important shift here in Australia. So above ground mausolea allow for much larger community groups to be buried in a space that's a very economical use of land. 2004 is a significant year for the cemetery. It involves a name change from Northern Suburbs Cemetery to Macquarie Park Cemetery and Crematoria. They build the crematoria, they build 3 chapels, they extend the gardens as well to provide more lawn cemeteries and bushland settings. And this really continues on the evolution of the landscape design here at the cemetery, providing us with a wonderful view and a beautiful place to actually go and experience both garden design, landscape design, but also experience nature in an urban environment. So what we see here at Macquarie Park Cemetery and Crematoria is really the history of Australian society all in one place. The ethnic communities that come to Australia, the changing values we have around death and burial, the way we remember people and commemorate people, all of that is reflected in the design and landscape and the facilities provided here at Macquarie Park Cemetery.